Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here with me today where we are going to make some chicken pot pie. I made chicken pot pie in a new way a couple of weeks ago and it worked out really well for our family. So I wanted to share that method with you. So we're going to start out by making some pastry. But before we do that, we're going to wash our hands, which is always a good practice. And we are going to try, and I have not tried this yet, some of the soap that we made together a couple of months ago and see if it actually lathers up. It still smells good, so that means that I put enough of the essential oil in it. Sometimes if you don't put enough essential oil, the smell fades away really quickly, but this smells good. This was, I think it was lavender and patchouli. I can still smell the patchouli in there for sure. So we're going to wash our hands with that. And then one of the things that we're going to do after we're done that is I'm going to chat with you about liquefying honey, which is what I'm doing on the stove over there. But let's go over and wash my hands up and see how the soap does first. Oh my goodness. Look at that. It's lathering beautifully. That is a very cool feeling to be washing my hands with soap that I made myself. Oh my gosh. I did not expect it to be that good. That's so awesome. Hands feel nice and squeaky clean. Okay, I'm never buying bar soap again. I love it when I try something new and it actually works. That's always a good thing, especially something like soap that takes a couple of months to know whether it worked or not. And I have, I think, 10 or so bars of the soap downstairs and I can now go disperse throughout the bathrooms and the kitchen and everything. So that's awesome. Now I have clean hands. Let's dry my hands off. For our chicken pot pie, I already have some chicken in the oven roasting right now. I like to use roasted chicken, but you could absolutely use canned chicken if that's what you had access to. So we're gonna roast that up and I won't be able to add the chicken to this recipe until later on today when the meat has cooled down and I'm able to cut it up. But that's okay because what we're actually going to do is make our crust up now and put it in the fridge so that it's ready to go when we need it. And then we're going to put our potatoes, our veggies, and the gravy part of the chicken pot pie into our roaster oven there to slow cook while our chicken is cooking in the oven. And when I made this recipe last time, we had a really busy day, which we have today as well. And I needed to have a meal that would come together fairly quickly when I got home from town. And by having all these pieces done in the morning, it made it so easy just to throw it together, pop it in the oven to bake on the top because the chicken and the filling with the potatoes and the veggies were already cooked up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's first make our pastry. Now, I should add a caveat here that making pastry is not something that I would consider myself to be very good at. This recipe is pretty much a foolproof recipe. It's just a recipe off of the back of the Tender Flake lard that you can buy from the grocery store, and it works pretty much every time. The biggest thing that you want to do is to make sure that your lard is nice and cold when you are making your crust. So I'm just going to cut up my lard here, and you could use a pastry cutter for this if you had one, which I don't know why. It's just not something that I have ever purchased. I guess that makes sense though, because I don't generally make a lot of crust. So we're just gonna cut this up. I am going to add 5 cups of all-purpose flour to this. And a good teaspoon of salt. Maybe this is why my crusts never turn out really well, because I never measure anything. So you'll hear varying opinions about making pie crust. And some people will say not to use your hands at all because it warms up the lard and you want the lard to stay nice and cold and to just use a pastry cutter, whereas other people, and somebody that I really respect in the kitchen world says she actually uses her hands and she does, I can't remember what she calls it, but she squeezes the fat, whatever fat she's using to make her pie crust, each piece of it with her fingers. Oh, I wish I could remember what she called it, but I cannot. So anyway, so I just use my hands and just try to work really quickly. And you want this basically the consistency of oatmeal. So if you need a little bit more flour, you can add another half a cup of flour, which I'm gonna do here. And it's actually 2 teaspoons of salt, not 1. So I threw in another teaspoon of salt there. So then we're gonna set this aside and we're going to grab our 1 cup measure. We're going to add 1 egg to our cup measure and give this a whisk. A tablespoon of white vinegar. And then we're gonna top this off with as cold a water as we can get. And my water is fairly cold, it's spring water. And we'll give that a little bit of a stir. And I do find that I often need a little bit of extra water, so I'm just gonna get some extra water here to add to our pastry. And pour this over the top of our dough. So we want to mix this just until it starts coming together like it is there, you can see. Just going to add a little bit more water to this. I always find that because we have such a dry climate where we are here, that I end up having to add more water in almost every recipe than it calls for. Just going to gently knead our dough here, and we do not want to mix it too much because we don't want to activate the gluten, because the gluten will make it more tough and more bread-like than nice and flaky like a pie crust. So now we're just going to flatten these out, and we're going to pop these into the fridge to stay chilled until we need them. And I'm likely not going to need this much pastry, but I'll freeze whatever I don't end up using. I wanted to show you what I am doing back over here with this pot. So I have some crystallized honey in these jars that I'm wanting to liquefy. This is the honey that I use for my tea in the morning, and I like having it in the squeeze bottles. I'll show you the little squeeze bottles I have over here that some friends of mine sent me, and they're just super convenient and cute. But obviously when it is crystallized, it is difficult to get into those. So what I like to do to liquefy my honey, and I should say that honey, all honey will crystallize over time, unless it has additives in it. It's something always to watch for when you're buying honey at the grocery store. But if it doesn't have additives in it, it will crystallize naturally over time as the water in the honey evaporates. If you want to liquefy your honey, you can put it in a pot of water on your stove. Keep the temperature really low, especially if you are liquefying raw honey, because you don't want to kill all the good stuff that's in your honey. And keep it on the stove, letting it warm until it has liquefied again. Do keep in mind that if you are liquefying honey that is already crystallized, it will crystallize again in a fairly short amount of time. So I always only liquefy the amount of honey that I know I can use up in about a month or so. So that's what we're doing over there. But now we are going to bring you over here. So what we're gonna do over here is add all the ingredients that we want for our gravy and our veggies. I have some chopped potatoes over here that are nice, small bite-sized chunks of potato that I'm going to be adding into this as well. And like I said, I have my chicken in the oven roasting, and once that has roasted, I'll cut it up and cool down a bit. I'll cut it up and add it to this after. But because I have a really busy day, I want to get all of this put together and ready to go so that I can just add the chicken and put the crust on just shortly before we are wanting to eat. So first thing we're going to do is drain off our water in our potatoes. Actually, for an added thickener, you could leave your water and add your water to this. because of all those starches that come out of the potatoes as they're sitting. That will help to thicken a little bit. But since I want to add chicken stock to this for the added flavoring, I'm gonna dump that water out. So now I'm gonna add veggies. You can add, obviously, I'm making a large batch here, so I'm going to be adding lots. You can, of course, add veggies from your garden, veggies from, fresh veggies from the grocery store, but in this case, I am using these organic mixed veggies that I got from Costco. So we're gonna throw that in there. And then we're going to add about 1/2 cup of flour to this. A good pinch of salt. I am going to add some poultry seasoning to this. We're going to run down to the pantry. Oh shoot, I forgot to put my hair up. I try to keep my hair up when I'm working in the kitchen, of course, for obvious reasons. Okay, let's go down to the pantry. Oh, Dan got the floor done in this part of the basement here, so that's awesome. And we need some broth, and I'm running very low on broth. So we're gonna grab 2 of these. I'm not sure if I'll need 2, but we'll grab 2 just in case. You know what? Instead of adding 2 quarts of our chicken broth, since I'm running so low, I am going to add 1 of the French onion soup that I made. So this has onions, garlic, and beef broth in it, but that'll be fine. It'll taste just fine. But that way I don't need to chop up onions and garlic to add to this, so that's perfect. French onion soup. Oh, it smells so good. And our chicken broth. Now, sometimes if I don't have a ton of flavor in my broth, which happens from time to time, I will add a little bit of better than bouillon to this, but I know with that French onion soup, this is gonna have more than enough flavor. So we'll give this a mix, and then we're just gonna set this on probably around 300 or so, maybe 250, to cook up while our chicken is cooking in the oven. Last time I made this, I added some basil to it, and we all agreed that the basil was the wrong flavor. More of a sagey kind of flavor, which seems obvious, right? So that's why I just added the poultry seasoning, because it has all of that sage in it. So we're gonna pop this back into the freezer, put our lid on here, and now it's just a waiting game until our chicken is done roasting in the oven. All right, my friends, we are back at it. I just had a wonderful nap. I'm feeling much refreshed. And our chicken is now done. So I am going to peel the meat that I want off of this chicken, and I also have some chicken breasts in the bottom in a liquid underneath this chicken. And we are going to cut all that up and put it into our gravy and our veggies that are back over there. I actually decided to stay home rather than go to town with everybody and get a little bit of rest to see if I can't kick this last bit of this cold. And I am feeling a little bit better now, which is wonderful. So I just mentioned that I was running low on chicken stock. So once I remove all the meat that I want, I'm going to throw the rest of it and the bones back into my Dutch oven here and make some broth. So I'll show you what I add to that when we get to that point. So we prefer white meat in our chicken pot pie. So I am going to remove the breasts from this chicken and put the back and the wings right back into the pot here. Grab off a little bit of this thigh meat here, pop our legs in there, and we're just going to cut our meat into bite-size chunks to add to our pot pie. Now I'm going to add this to our veggies and our gravy and see how that is for ratio. And if I have enough, then I'll save these for some salad or something tomorrow, or some sandwiches or something else. So we have our veggies and our gravy here. So we're just going to add our chicken. Oh yeah, I think that's probably going to be perfect. So there we go. We have our filling. I did end up adding a little bit of bouillon because it needed a little bit more flavor to it. So we have that. Now what we're going to do is set this chicken aside over here and wash our counter and then make or roll out our pastry. We are actually going to take this pastry and put it right into our roaster oven, right on top of everything in the roaster oven. So we need kind of a large rectangle. So we may end up needing to use, two, just about. So what I did the last time is I just took the extra and folded it in around the sides like so. Then I took this whole big beautiful thing out of here and popped this in the oven to just bake up the top. And it worked just perfectly. I always put a little bit of water in the bottom of my roaster oven because it does help things not to scald. And our honey is now melted back over there, so I'm going to put that into a couple of squeezable containers. So I think what I am going to do with these extra pie crusts that I have over here is put together a quick apple pie, because I have apple pie filling down in the pantry. And rather than freeze it, might as well make a pie, and then we can have that tomorrow for, I don't know, something. Eat it at some point tomorrow. We won't do it, have it today though, because we're already having the chicken pot pie for dinner tonight. So I'm just gonna grab a pie plate and some of that apple pie filling. Isn't this a beautiful pie plate? This was a gift, and it is Pioneer Woman is the name of the brand of it, but I just think it's so pretty. So we're going to use that. We have our pie filling here, and excuse me, and our crust. So now I guess I have to grab my flour back out of the cupboard and put this together. We're on to day 23 of the pantry challenge, and it is going really, really well. Dan and I are going to sit down and chat with you probably around the end of this month and give you kind of a more comprehensive update of where we're at with it and how we're feeling about it. But we're feeling really good. The only thing I would say that we're missing right now is fresh vegetables. Definitely, without a doubt, that's a bit challenging, not having fresh tomatoes and fresh cucumbers. Fresh lettuce, things like that. So we do have our microgreens, and we do have our sprouts as far as the greens go. And then we have tons of freeze-dried and frozen and canned vegetables, fruits and vegetables, but nothing's like fresh, right? Even though what we get even up here is not exactly fresh. Everything's shipped in, but it's still quite a nice thing to have, and definitely quite a privilege to be able to have, actually, to be able to access that stuff. So out of season, like we have to do up here, just because we don't have a long growing season here. So that would be what I would say would be the biggest thing that we've noticed. Outside of that, we really have not noticed much difference. We are saving a fortune though. That's one thing I can say. We are definitely saving a lot of money on groceries. So we have our bottom crust done. Okay, I have my pie crust all ready to go here, so I'm just going to roll out the top crust. Going to add our pie filling. I figured I was going to need 2. Is our timer for our chicken pot pie, which is pretty well finished. I made a little mistake there and cut off my bottom crust before my top crust was on. Whoops. Like I said, making pastries and pies and things like that is not my area of expertise in the kitchen. That is for sure. And we're going to give our pie an egg wash. And we will give this a little sprinkle of sugar. Pop this back in here again. We have our crust all done. And I'm going to turn this on to keep warm, and then it will be still nice and warm when my family gets home for dinner. And our pie into the oven. Hi, kitty. And what's nice is, like most people, whenever I have a cold or I'm just not feeling well, I might feel totally fine in the morning, but towards supper time, I start feeling pretty run down again, and that is definitely happening. So this is great because now dinner is finished. I have a pie made for tomorrow, and I can sit down and take it easy now for the rest of the day. So I think I'm going to light a fire in the fireplace and have a cup of tea. Sounds like the perfect thing to do. It's almost going to be too warm for a fire within the next couple days, if you can believe it. It's going to be 10 degrees Celsius. So from negative 35, I think we ended up hitting last week, to 10 above this coming up week. Been some pretty wild swings in weather this year, that's for sure. Oh, before I pause here, actually, let's get this counter cleaned off first, and then I'll do this honey. Where did my cloth go? There it is. This honey that I have been slowly heating over there has a little bit of wax left in it. I didn't do a great job of straining it, so I'm just going to strain it through a little bit of cheesecloth because it's for my tea, and I don't want to have wax in my tea. Oh, I still have one that's not quite uncrystallized yet. But this one looks good. So now we just strain this out and then pour it into our jar. Or not a jar, I guess our squeeze bottle. There, now some liquid honey for my tea. Hi, Alex. What you doing, cutie? I'm going to leave the cover off of my roaster oven over there just so that my crust on the top doesn't start getting soggy. So I'm going to go have to find another squeeze bottle because I have more honey there, and then I have a little bit more in this jar over here. But like I said, this one has a little ways to go yet. I'll be back with you as soon as our pie comes out of the oven so that I can show you that all finished, and then we'll also take a piece of our chicken pot pie out of there and we'll give it a taste test. Dan snuck in and took some and he said it was really, really good, which is great news. So I'll try a little bit of it. Just a little bit because it's not supper time yet, but I know it can be a little bit anticlimactic when I make things and don't actually taste them for you and see if they're any good. You're right, that is good. It's better than the last one. Definitely omitting the basil was a good idea. It's good. And we have our apple pie over here, which I'm not going to cut into. I'm sorry to say, because we are going to save that for tomorrow. I will let you know though in the next video what everybody thinks of it. I hope that you enjoyed this video, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.